All kinds of people have these horrendous struggles on their way to the top. Nobody got there. Nobody became an overnight success. It took people, everybody I ever talked to, had lots of struggles, pain, heartache, and loss along the way.
All right, welcome back. What is up, guys? Welcome to another week of the Man of Mastery podcast, episode 23, How to Lose Money with Paul Moore. Before we jump in with Paul, I want to give you a few updates, a couple housekeeping items, and of course, as always, a preview of what I took away as actionable and beneficial from the podcast with Paul. So first, about what I'm doing here. As you guys know, I've been out there kind of pushing the envelope to learn, to experience, and that's for me. But this podcast and everything Man of Mastery ultimately is for you. It's for me to try to share what's working, things I'm discovering, things that might be helpful to you if you're tackling similar problems, have similar desires, similar goals, and I want to share that. I also want to share and be transparent about what's not working, or failures or challenges along the way, because this is really about being real and kind of cutting through to what's actually going to work. And as we all know, failure is part of the process. So some of the things I've been doing, and you know some of them, I've been out there training with Navy SEALs. Some people have asked me, what's the deal with having all the Navy SEALs on the show? And there have been a few of them now. I've been training with some of these guys. It's one in particular, Mark Divine, the Unbeatable Mind program, who you may know of, offers a holistic training. And this is right in line with what I'm looking for in terms of not only physical training, but emotional control, mental toughness, intuitional, and the service-minded spirit. So much so that I'm doing some stuff with Mark and his team that I will fill you in on here, probably in the next week or two in a special podcast episode dedicated to that. And you also may remember from last week's podcast with Greg Amundsen, I had a huge Crucible event that I've been working up towards. This was a Spartan Ultra Beast, meaning ultra marathon, designed for about 31 miles up and down the mountain in Lake Tahoe, California, Squaw Valley, 9,500 feet of ascending, something like 70 obstacles. And as it turns out, cold, windy, snow, rain, hail, lightning, the whole deal. Absolutely epic. So I'll probably also have an episode or some sort of a recap on that coming up. And there are plenty of not only lessons learned, but as I said, absolutely the failures and the barriers and the doubts and fears and the stuff that we all go through, but that we can learn from, learn how to address. Maybe you do it in a manufactured Crucible event like that or something else, and then you bring it back to everyday life. You bring it to family, you bring it to work, you bring it to life's challenges. In the end, all this stuff and what I'm trying to help share in Man of Mastery is about what's going to move the needle for you. What's going to move the needle in performance, in life, work, family. It's incremental change that compounds into extraordinary results. And sometimes in looking back, when you build up with these incremental improvements, incremental change, you look back and you don't even necessarily see the sea change that's been happening. I give you an example. My wife just expressed, again, back to these Spartan races and the things that it's been teaching and challenging us to do. She just expressed to Joe DeSena, the founder of Spartan Race, that getting involved in this has absolutely changed our lives as individuals, as a family, in extraordinary ways. So all that said, guys, what I really want to express is that this is here, this forum, this community that I want to set up, this podcast is about trying to share and relay and expose to you what I think might be helpful. And really, it's not about what I think. It's about what you want, what you think, what you need. So with that, I would ask, as I've asked in some recent weeks past, find a way to express to me what's working for you. Do you like the topics? Do you like the guests? What suggestions have you got? This is all through my lens, but what else would be helpful to you? What other kind of guests? What other kind of topics? A great way to do this is to reach out to me through my Instagram page, which is at the Man of Mastery, on Instagram. Shoot me a comment there, shoot me a direct message there, and that's probably your best way right now. Email works as well. In the near future, we're also going to have a lot more activity in terms of Facebook. Facebook is not naturally my thing by any means, but I do have a group set up there. Nothing's really happening there yet, but as a bit of a preview on that as well, I'm doing some work with Ryan Mickler of Order of Man to help get that set up, get it rolling, and design a construct there that should be pretty interesting, active, and beneficial, again, for you. All right, so this week with Paul Moore, a few particular things that I took away from talking to Paul, lessons learned, and action items from today's podcast. So one, just along that line of recession-proof or recession-resistant investments, as Paul says, we can always expect that there will be peaks and there will be valleys just because humans are involved and we overcorrect. So he talks about that in the context of why it is so important to think about some particular types of commercial real estate that he talks about in the episode that he's back tested against the Great Recession, the global financial crisis. I mentioned a little bit about Paul's being in debt and his philosophy on giving and generosity, which is something I need a reminder on. Maybe we all do, maybe many of us do. And so Paul talks about giving his way out of debt. That's not a literal thing, but he does talk about it, and it's a great reminder that service and generosity and maybe specifically giving are something that we all need to be reminded of and find ways to work into our lives with the abundance that so many of us do have. Paul also talks about being a parent, being a father, and kids, and his philosophy, his approach that he and his wife took in transparency with the children, around the good and the bad, of course, and involving them as much as he could in not only the family and decisions, but ultimately in his business. Okay, that was a big wind-up, guys. I just wanted to introduce you to some of those things that are coming in this episode, as well as update you on where we are as a podcast, where we are as a community, and again, ask for your involvement and ask for your guidance. So with that, let's jump on in with this week's episode 23 with Paul Moore, How to Lose Money. Today I'm joined by Paul Moore. We're going to talk about real estate as a vehicle for wealth creation and multi-generational wealth preservation, mindset, learning from failures, and things like the importance of being grounded in understanding your purpose. And Paul's got some incredible detailed knowledge he's going to talk to us about in the differences between commercial and residential real estate investments, and maybe some ways to go about that in a very profitable and sane and lower effort way to do things. So Paul, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, it's great to be here, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You've got a very storied and deep background, engineering, MBA from an educational perspective, startup of a staffing firm that you grew and transacted, a deep history in real estate investment, development in all aspects of the industry. And now you run a podcast, you're a contributor to the Bigger Pockets blog and vlog, and I understand managing director of a couple commercial real estate funds as well.
Yeah, it's exhausting, but yeah, that sounds about right. It's worse than that. I actually was a shiny object chaser for years. I used to say that I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I'm not even proud of that anymore. I did so many things that, I found myself at almost 50 and had all these different experiences, and they're helpful. But I think the best people out there, the wealthiest, most successful people focus on one thing for decades. And I try to counsel people I mentor now and my son, that's probably a better way to go. But yeah, that's pretty much my history right there.
Nice. Yeah, you sound extremely busy. You got a lot going on. I like the focus topic. I also understand you're a big Michigan Wolverines fan.
No, actually I'm not. I went to Ohio State.
Well, let's talk real estate. That's your current focus. And I know in particular you talk about some of the things you've learned over the years. And I know learning from failure, it's a huge thing. So you've talked about becoming a millionaire, going millions in debt, and then figuring out how to recover from that in a very short period of time. What precipitated that?
Yeah, so I actually sold my staffing firm to a publicly traded firm for a couple $1 million, and I was 33, and that seemed like an enormous amount of money in the 90s. And I thought I was an investor, and I thought I'm going to go start this nonprofit organization reaching out to international students. I bought 120 acres on top of a mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I thought I'd be a great husband, great father, and all that. And I actually became the worst version of myself as a husband and father. I mean, I was a driven type A entrepreneur. I was 34 by then. And, I had really no business trying to do anything like semi-retirement. I didn't know anything about investing. I called myself an investor, but I actually was more of a speculator. Investing is when your principal is generally safe and you've got a chance to make a return, but speculating is when your principal is not at all safe and you have a chance to make a return. And I was definitely a speculator, and I lost a lot of money that way. If you keep playing double or nothing with all your money, you're going to land on nothing at some point, and then you'll have nothing left to double. And that's where I found myself 10 years after I had the couple $1 million in the bank. I found myself $2.5 million in debt. And Michael, it's important to realize where I was sitting in November or December of 2007. I was assuming the worst of the real estate downturn was over because, again, there's no way without a crystal ball to look into the future. And of course, we know we were plunging into the Great Recession, and we'd already been feeling it for a year and a half here. And so we were hoping it was about over. Of course, it was just beginning. But anyway, I found myself with $2.5 million in debt with a partner. And the partner said, I can't make half of these interest payments anymore. Starting January 1st of 2008, I'm done. I'm going to give you the deeds to all the properties, because we had a bunch of waterfront lots at Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia we were flipping. And so anyway, I was meditating one morning, which I try to do in the morning, and journaling, and I had this crazy idea. What would George Mueller do? Now, George Mueller was a hellion turned pastor in Germany and then England, and he lived through all the 1800s. And George Mueller would never have been in debt in the first place. But if he would have been in debt, he would have done something completely counterintuitive, completely radical, something that made no sense to the rational mind. And so that sounded good to me at that point, considering I was backed up against a wall. I had two friends who were encouraging me to go ahead and declare bankruptcy. My family didn't know what was going on. And I said, I announced to all of them, I said, hey, I know what we're going to do. In the spirit of George Mueller, we're going to give our way out of debt. Well, that made a lot of sense. And so my friends thought I was crazy. My family said, oh, okay, whatever, Dad. And so we started giving in a very intentional way every week, starting January 1st, 2008, and with the hope that somehow, we would end up coming up with some solution to get us out of debt. We had a 5-acre waterfront parcel that would have been very valuable if it would have been cut up into 5 1-acre lots, but it was not subdividable. We had done everything possible to do that. Well, about 4 weeks into this aggressive giving campaign, the end of January, I came up, based on an offhanded comment by a realtor, or excuse me, a real estate developer, I came up with this harebrained scheme to divide this 5-acre parcel. And I went down to the county planning and zoning people, and I ran it by them, and they said, you are crazy. This is the most crazy idea we've ever heard. But actually, you found a loophole in the law. You're right. You can do this. And so I worked really hard all through 2008. And in the very, very worst weeks of the Great Recession, I was able to sell 4 of those 5 lots. And through more crazy stuff than you can imagine, I ended up completely debt-free in 13 months.
Wow, that's a crazy ride. So you're on the verge of going BK. And when you start giving, were you giving away real estate? Is that what you mean?
No, we were just aggressively giving money to nonprofits and our church and things that we cared about, just basically believing in the law of sowing and reaping, or other people call it, karma. We just believe in that universal law that you give and you'll get back.
Amazing. Okay, gotcha. Thanks for clarifying that. And talk a little bit about the mindset as you went through all that. And you mentioned being very driven the 10 years prior to that, becoming a multimillionaire in your early 30s. And you mentioned morning meditation and journaling. Is that something you had throughout those years, or did that evolve as you matured and maybe even through some of the harder years?
No, it's something I did all along since I was about 23, and I've kept that practice. I mean, it looks different every week, every month. But that's something I've kept up over the years.
Kudos. Yeah, that's a great morning routine, morning ritual. You want to touch on the differences between resi and commercial as a real estate investor?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of an overarching comment I'll make is I tell my son who's in his 20s and younger friends, younger employees in our company, if I would have known the power of commercial real estate in my 20s, I never would have done anything else. It would have been my one thing I would have focused on all along. And even if I had a job, a day job as an engineer or whatever, I would have plowed any passive investment money I could have into commercial investments. Now, the problem was commercial investing had huge barriers to entry for decades, almost forever. And, the Forbes 400 wealthiest people, almost all of them are in commercial real estate in some form. But the Jobs Act of 2012 and even the Tax Reform Act of 2017 have opened the doors and made it more advantageous than ever for lots and lots of people to invest in commercial real estate. So in 2011, we actually did another shiny object chase and threw money down an oil well in North Dakota, lost the money, but in the process, we realized the opportunity was there to provide housing for the tens of thousands of oil workers who were congregating in Northwest North Dakota, many of them sleeping in their trucks or RVs or campers. And so we built a beautiful multifamily project. We operated that for years. We sold it for a nice profit. Then we built, actually, I should say my friend built a Hyatt hotel, and everything that went right with the first project went wrong with the second, and it did not end well. But the Hyatt hotel is still the nicest Hyatt house that we know of, at least in America, and it's still operating today, not by us. But at any rate, I ended up getting in Class B multifamily, which is basically, 20, 30, 40-year-old multifamily. The problem is, as a lot of people who are chasing real estate deals know today, single family and multifamily is extremely overheated. And so we were looking to expand out of multifamily a few years ago. We stumbled into self-storage and mobile home parks. We started investing in those passively, and we realized, hey, this is a great opportunity for a lot of people. So we put together a couple different funds at Wellings Capital, and we allow investors to invest in those funds, and then we invest with these very well vetted operators in their deals. So we're giving a lot of people, a lot of investors, access passively to these wonderful operators and these wonderful deals. So that's what we do now.
Yeah. Okay. So talk about that a little bit, the difference between maybe going after this as an individual, a weekend warrior, trying to figure it out on your own, making some of the mistakes, as you mentioned, you have in the past, versus going to a professional, maybe going to a fund like Wellings.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that in two parts. So first of all, a lot of people watch HGTV and, they see that, hey, I can do that. I can be like Chip and Joanna Gaines. My wife or I have great taste in, decorating and all that. So they go out and they try to do this, and the problem right now is it's so overheated that, it used to be you could go to the courthouse steps and buy, a house sometimes for 40 cents on the dollar and go rehab it and sell it for a huge profit. But it's really harder to do that these days. But it's also a tremendous amount of hassle. A lot of time is wasted. I talked to a guy today who said he was in, Spokane, Washington. He said, I spent 300 to 400 hours of my time. And, that's a fifth of a year of work. That's full-time work for what's that, 3-4 months, I guess, almost. Full-time looking for one triplex to buy. And I bought it, and it's not that profitable. And so the difference in investing in commercial real estate is, like I said, I'm going to answer this in two parts. First of all, commercial real estate has a value formula. Now, residential real estate, if I was Chip and Joanna Gaines Jr. and I took a $300,000 house and did amazing things to it, I finished the basement, I finished the attic, I added on, I put gold-plated fixtures. I took, let's say I spent $500,000 improving this $300,000 house. You would hope that I could be able to get over $800,000 out of it. But if it's in a neighborhood of $300,000 houses, it's going to be limited by comps, by the comparable properties, and almost everybody knows this. Commercial real estate's entirely different. It's based on a value formula. The math on this is the value equals the income divided by the rate of return, or more specifically, it's the net operating income divided by the cap rate. And so because of this formula, that means that the buyers are buying not bricks and sticks and dirt, they're actually buying an income stream. And so if I can significantly improve the income, and if I can find a way to compress the cap rate, the rate of return expected, and there are ways to do it sometimes, then I can significantly drive asset value, income, and using safe leverage, I can dramatically improve returns for my investors. If you'd like, I can give you a very quick example.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so let's say I bought a mobile home park, and we just invested in a mobile home park that's very similar to this. It's not sold yet, so I can't say that these are our returns. I wouldn't want to say that, but we expect returns like this. So let's say it was a $5 million mobile home park. Now, that if using safe leverage, that means I put $3 million in debt on it and $2 million in cash or in equity. Okay, and let's say that was the situation at purchase. Now, the operator, the asset manager that we work with, went in and he said, man, there's like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 extra cars in front of some of these mobile homes. And there's boats and RVs and work trailers. We got to clean this place up so we can make it nicer and we can rent it for a little bit more. So he paved an acre of weeds out front. He put a beautiful fence and a gate around it with a lock. And he said, okay, if you've got an extra car or boat or RV or whatever, you've got to park it over here. And we're going to charge you a fee to park in this gated parking area. So they made everybody do that. And then when everybody in the park is done with that, they're going to be offering that as, paid parking, paid storage for the community. Now, he spent $100,000 paving and gating this, but the income from it is $10,000 a month. Well, $10,000 a month is $120,000 a year. $120,000 a year based on a $100,000 investment is a 120% annual return. That sounds really good, but it's better than that because that's additional net operating income. Remember our value formula. If you divide the net operating income by the cap rate, you'll get the value. Well, if you take an extra $120,000 a year in income, you divide it by an average cap rate of, say, 6% or 0.06, that's a $2 million increase in value. That sounds great. That's a 40% increase in the assets value, but it's better than that because the bankers don't get to touch this gain. It all goes to the equity holders. Remember, there was $3 million in debt, $2 million in equity. Well, we just increased the equity by $2 million more. We just doubled the value of the equity, or we basically just achieved, at least on paper, 100% appreciation for the equity holders. That's amazing. And that was by one change. That's before he went and filled a lot of extra lots at the mobile home park. It's before he raised rent to market levels. It's before he started renting out, sheds and carports and decks and did all kinds of things to, improve income at the property. And so there's lots of ways to force appreciation, and that's just one example. And that's why I love commercial real estate investing. I'll take a brief pause here, and then I can try to answer your question finally.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll keep going, but that's a great example to really understand that you've got some levers you can pull on appreciation, on value creation, and then in commercial that you've just got a clear line or delineation to value based on future cash flow or future rate of return, future net operating income.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And so you asked, what about weekend warriors? Well, it's really hard to do this at home. I mean, if you're casually going after this, it's going to be hard to find that mobile home park, from a mom and pop seller. It's going to be hard to find a self-storage facility in the path of growth if you're, trying to do this on the side. And it's even hard, like I said, to find a duplex or a triplex or a single family home these days. The real estate market, as we record this at least, is very, very hot, Michael. So we recommend that people consider, if they understand everything I just said, they consider investing passively. I mean, sure, you can go and quit everything else you're doing and put all your focus and attention and maybe do this. But if you're not going to give it everything you have, if you're not going to be a pro, consider investing passively with a professional like the guys I just mentioned. Let them do all the hard work. Let them get the loan. Let them take the risk. And then you share the profit with them. I mean, the question is, would you rather have 75% of a $100 profit, or would you rather 100% of a $20 profit and all the headaches, toilets, tenants, and trash with it? Well, a lot of people realize they're working harder than they need to make less than they could. And that's why companies like ours exist, to give people access to passive opportunities.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. I mean, lots of headaches, and not to get into all the details of it. You got a nice, simple, high-level example that just sounds to make great sense. But you've got things as let's say a residential landlord, rental property. You got a lot of headaches that you just simply don't have in commercial, a triple net rental, where you just push a lot of that cost and a lot of that headache down to your tenant. So I'm just going to ask you, in terms of commercial real estate and the huge boom and bust real estate cycle that we seem to be on more or less like a 10-year that we're probably overdue for. So I know a lot of people sit on the sidelines right now, maybe stockpiling cash and waiting for that next downturn, or maybe a bit concerned about investing now at what could be a peak.
Yeah, so we're in the longest expansion that we have ever seen as a nation, I believe, as of July 1st. And so because there's humans involved, there's a 100% chance that there will be peaks and valleys, there will be recessions. We just don't know the timing or the duration or the severity of these. But yeah, we do expect that will happen. I will tell you that one of Welling's missions is to find the most recession-proof investments. And of course, mobile home parks and self-storage, and then to a slightly lesser degree, apartments are the most recession-resistant assets that we are aware of. And that's why we love investing in these. For time's sake, I'll summarize by saying, mobile home parks didn't have even a tiny, no blip at all in the last Great Recession 11 years ago. That didn't have any downturn. And if you think about it, people paying $280, which is the national average, I think, lot rent, where are they going to go? I mean, if they can't afford $280 in lot rent, they're going to end up under a bridge. And so, and there were people who were being downsized out of homes and apartments who were coming to mobile home parks during the recession. And so it really is a very, very steady, stable asset class. Self-storage has similar logic. When people are downsizing and they're leaving their 4,000 square foot home for two, or a 2,000 square foot home for an apartment, for a very small percentage of their income, they can keep all their stuff instead of, taking it to the dump or Goodwill in a storage unit for maybe $100 a month. They can store their stuff, and they do that in bad times. But in good times, they're filling up their Walmart and their Amazon carts, and they need a place to store their stuff. And so self-storage is largely recession resistant. Mobile home parks are better though because they're not building them anymore. There's a net loss of about 90 mobile home parks, we believe, in the U.S. every year, but the demand is increasing for those, especially as we have 10,000 people a day turning 65, but only 4 in 10 have more than 10,000 saved for retirement, unbelievably.
Great. What about on the tax side? I think you use the quote partnering with the IRS. So are there advantages from a tax perspective as well?
Yeah, a friend of mine who'd been doing commercial real estate for decades said if the American people knew how little commercial real estate investors pay in taxes, we'd have another tax revolt on our hands. And it's funny, he went on to explain to me how he could take $20 million, reinvest it aggressively for 10 years, and then start making distributions in years 11 through 20. And at the end of the 20 years, that 20 million would have been leveraged into a $210 million portfolio that had already thrown off $131 million in income along the way. But what really amazed me, he had the math to prove that, though it sounds unbelievable. He was actually able to show me how that investor with that 20 million turned into a $210 million leverage portfolio might have paid as little as zero tax all along the way. Commercial real estate investors and real estate investors in general have lots and lots of tax saving opportunities, from bonus depreciation, which was part of Section 179 that was really amped up in the last tax reform bill, to accelerated depreciation from cost segregation studies, which means basically you're accelerating the depreciation on properties, giving investors an effective loss on their tax return while they're filling up their bank account at the same time. Lots of other tax saving opportunities. We all have heard, almost all of us have heard of a 1031 exchange, and the 1031 exchange was eliminated in the tax reform bill of 2017 for art, collectibles, airplanes, trucks, cars, all kinds of things, but not for real estate. And so that opportunity to do a 1031 exchange and not pay capital gains tax, kicking the can down the road, is really powerful. And they say everybody has to die and pay taxes, but it's possible only death is mandatory at this point, because people that hold their real estate assets through their death, their children are often, their heirs are often able to reset the basis on that at their death, and bring the basis in that property up to current market level, which means they might never have to pay capital gains tax on a lifetime of gains.
That's great. Let's work on figuring out how to deal with death once we conquered taxes. But yeah. I mean, a lot of us are fortunate enough to be in a position where financially we've sort of run out of opportunities for write-offs, for deductions, and are looking for tax advantaged opportunities. So that's great to hear about real estate from a tax perspective. Can you you hit that last point very quickly. So can you say more about the multi-generational approach, or passing on something like real estate, or specifically commercial real estate, and the tax basis reset for future generations?
Yeah, I mean, so let's just say I started buying commercial real estate in my 40s, and I kept doing 1031 exchange. Let's say I did accelerated tax deductions through through cost segregation studies. Let's say I did 1031 exchanges when I sold one asset and bought another. And let's say I didn't pay taxes on it all along the way. And let's say I, invested millions of dollars over the years, and it turned into tens of millions. Let's just say $10 million in assets at the time I pass away someday. Well, there's going to be, if I sell that right before I die, I'm going to have to pay all that back capital gains tax. And in places like California, that could be a lot of money, because there's a state capital gains tax, from what I understand, as well as the federal. But if you hold on to that asset and your heirs take it over, they can get an appraisal right after your death, and they can say, oh, it's actually worth 10 million, not, we don't have to, if you would have paid the tax on it before you passed away, it might have been 10 million value minus 1 million that you had in basis. But they actually bring the basis up to the 10 million at the passing of the individual. So the heirs might not have to pay any tax at all, and they sell it the next day. They can potentially pay no capital gains at all. So it's a really powerful way to pass on wealth to the next generation.
Got it. Okay, thanks for elaborating on that. That makes sense. Yeah, here in California, we pay a lot of, we call it sunshine tax.
I've heard that.
Yeah. You mentioned focus a couple times, and you even said your one thing. You also, and tell me if this is the same or different, you also talk about knowing your why and why it's so important, not only to investors, but you mentioned entrepreneurs, executives. Tell me more about that and what that looks like for you, and maybe even bring that back to a focus in real estate.
Yeah, so I read a book over and over by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan called The One Thing, and a lot of us have heard of that. A lot of us have read it, and it's really hard to apply it, but it's really important that we do. We just need to have a singular focus and basically get rid of all the noise, all the distractions, all the social media things that are clamoring for our attention so we can focus on what's most important. And that's both in the short term, that means this hour, this day, this week, but also the long term. What's my one thing for my 5, 10, 20, 30-year plan? Part of that should be having a big why. It's different, but it's part of it. Having a big why is what drives us on when we have success. I talked to an entrepreneur the other day who said he was incredibly driven while he was building his company. And then he got up to this certain place where he had grown it to as large as he ever wanted it to be. And now he was bored and depressed, and he didn't really know what he was doing, why he was doing it, didn't know why to come to work, even though he was making a lot of money. He needed a big why. And I think we all need that. For me and for Wellings Capital, my company, we are alarmed. About 3 years ago, somebody showed me a documentary called Nefarious. Some people call it Nefarious. And it was about human trafficking. Did you know, Michael, that if you took the record profits from Nike, General Motors, Starbucks, and Apple, added those record profits together, doubled that number, that's the approximate annual revenues they believe is being generated by human trafficking around the world right now. It's appalling.
Yep.
And, I want to believe that if I would have been alive in the mid-1800s, I would have been fighting as an abolitionist against slavery. And I want to believe that if I would have been an adult in the 1950s and 60s, I would have been fighting for civil rights. Well, this is a civil right, and it's been ripped away by tens of millions of people who have been enslaved. And I just think as long as I'm alive on the planet and as long as Wellings Capital is making money, we want to do something to fight this great evil. So we're trying to get the word out about it, and we're trying to encourage our investors, our friends, others to invest in stopping this evil. And of course, we are investing ourselves.
Nice. That's an amazing why and an amazing service and way to give back. I love that. What else about Wellings should people know? Do you often see investors come to a fund like this and something like commercial real estate investing with after-tax dollars, or your checkbook 401ks or qualified plans that have the flexibility to invest?
We get a lot of each. We have a lot of folks who come to us with cash, and of course that's after tax, and then other people with Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs, 401k, solo 401k, checkbook controlled. And we get people in all those categories who invest with our company.
Okay, great. And you talk more about it on your weekly podcast, How to Lose Money, or what's the topic of that one?
We don't actually talk about that kind of stuff. We really, how to lose money. I used to go to these father-daughter retreats, and I wish they still had them, but it was in Georgia, and my daughter and I went 7 years straight. And these amazing fathers would get up and they would lead the conference, and they'd speak about the great exploits of their families and their vacations and all the mission trips they took and how they were all together. And man, I would look back around the table of 10 fathers and daughters, and I would see the guys kind of slumping over, feeling like, man, I'll never be that good of a father. And my daughter even admitted that she was jealous of the girls in some of these families on stage because they had so much fun and their families didn't argue like ours did at home, and they seemed so happy. I knew in my heart of hearts that there was something more to this. So every year I would put on my comment card, hey, why don't you talk about some of your failures? Why don't you talk about some of your struggles? They never did. Somebody even asked them once, hey, what are you struggling with? And they all were like deer in the headlights. They didn't answer it. And I got to know one of these families pretty well. We hung out with them. They even came to our vacation home. And the daughters told my daughters they fought like cats and dogs at home and they had all kinds of struggles. And instead of looking down on them, all of a sudden my heart was encouraged. I felt like, hey, there's hope. This great family, and they still are a great family, they just had struggles just like us. There's hope for us. And I saw the same thing in business, Michael. I saw people, all kinds of people have these horrendous struggles on their way to the top. Nobody got there. Nobody became an overnight success. It took people, everybody I ever talked to had lots of struggles, pain, heartache, and loss along the way. So we decided to start a podcast called How to Lose Money, tongue in cheek. And basically we talk to successful investors, business owners, and entrepreneurs about their struggles on the path to the success they have now. And they open up and they share their heart, and hopefully hopefully it's helpful for them, but it really helps our audience be encouraged and realize that we all have great hope because, everybody knows their own struggles. Now they get to hear about these very successful people's struggles along the way.
I love that. I love the topic and the transparency and vulnerability that go with it. And certainly we learn from things we do right and succeed at, but there's so much to learn in the failures and the setbacks. I know all of us have those painful, very expensive, oftentimes lessons that are just incredible knowledge to pass along. What are a couple ways that you've found to pass along that sort of knowledge to your children, both in terms of mindset and in finance and investing?
Yeah, so my oldest son is a real estate investor. He's 26. He's doing really well right now. I think I've worked from home a lot over the years, and so they get to see some of these struggles. I'm really vulnerable and transparent with them about, problems, failures, things we're going through. So that's one thing. I think kids need to just in the same way that audience at that retreat needed to see vulnerability, I think kids need to see it as well. My wife and I don't do a whole lot to hide it when we're having a struggle or arguing. We'll kind of share it with the kids. And so those are some of the things we do, just trying to spend a lot of time together, shared experiences, things like that have been really helpful, I think, passing that along to our kids.
That's great. I like it. And what else should people know about Wellings? What's the best way to find you, find the website, find out more about your fund, as well as your podcasts, your blog, how to contact you, maybe for opportunities or just more information?
All right, great. Well, we work with accredited investors, and if you're accredited, you'll know what that means likely. But basically, you can get hold of us at wellingscapital.com. That's WELLINGSCAPITAL, wellingscapital.com. You can email us info@wellingscapital.com. I blog a lot and do some video on biggerpockets.com. And of course, we have howtolosemoney.com is where our podcast is situated. It's also on lots of platforms like iTunes and Stitcher.
Nice. Got it. Okay. And in the show notes for this episode, I will put links to all of that for you. And then let's come back around maybe to close out on service and the mission you're on to help with the terrible problem of human trafficking. What are you and Wellings doing with that? And what's a good place to find more information on that problem? And I'm sure a lot of people have the same empathy and disgust with it, but may just not even know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, we just like I believe that real estate investors should outsource, their investing to professionals. We outsource to professionals as well. We love organizations like Exodus Cry, who put out the movie Nefarious. They have other films that they're putting out. Exodus Cry is based I think they just moved from Kansas City to Sacramento, and we're really excited about working with them. IJM, a lot of people have heard of them, International Justice Mission. They've been tirelessly working on this for, I think it's decades probably, before anybody even really heard about it. There's another group, harvesthome.org, we like to support. But one thing I'm really excited about is Freedom Place Project, freedomplaceproject.com. I'm on the board of this. It's based in Dallas, and our goal is to build about $1 billion office tower. And we're going to be paying the investors, paying the contractors, paying the architects, but 100% of the developers' profits on an ongoing basis, and that's our team, 100% of our profits will go towards fighting human trafficking and rescuing its victims. And we're hoping to use this Dallas office tower as a prototype to do this again and again around the U.S. for decades to come.
That's amazing. I look forward to finding out more about that and wish you the best on that project. And Paul, thanks so much for the time and information today.
Okay, well, fantastic. Michael, it's been great being here. I'm honored to be on your show, and hopefully you don't have any losing money stories, but if you do, you're welcome to be a guest on our podcast as well.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I've got a bunch of those stories. Lots of expensive lessons learned, the real life MBAs, if you will. So yeah, I'd love to chat over there and collaborate on that topic one day soon as well.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
All right, that was a cool one. I really appreciate Paul's time on that one. I know a lot of us are always looking for creative ways to invest. Commercial real estate is probably out there, but maybe not something that many of us have touched yet. So check out Paul, check out Wellings Capital, check out How to Lose Money, his podcast, which I may appear on soon as well. I have a lot of those real world MBA kind of lessons myself, fortunately or unfortunately. So to do that, you can find all the links to Paul and Wellings in today's episode at manofmastery.com/023 for episode 23. manofmastery.com/023. All right, that's it for this week, guys. Just as a reminder, please, again, reach out on Instagram, shoot me a note, let me know what you think, what's working for you, what else would benefit you, how can this podcast better serve you, what kind of information are you looking for, what kind of things are you challenged by, not sure of, what are your goals. Help me out with some of that feedback and do what we can to get some topics covered for you and see if we can get you pushed in a similar direction. All right, guys, we will see you next week and look forward to some exciting topics and guests I've got coming up here, booked and ready to bring to you over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks.